I don't know why it's taken so long, considering that I've been some stripe of conservative or libertarian my entire life. But I think I finally understand the red pill. It feels like we've been at a point for a while where people on both sides of the aisle can't communicate with each other. It's like they live in separate realities. Like, I've always been some stripe of conservative, libertarian, something like this. However, I grew up in like a blue state in a blue city, going to blue schools. Outside of my family, there was almost no chance I was going to interact with somebody on the right unless I kind of hunted them down. And some of this, I think, is just that conservatives tend to be quiet, especially when they're in enemy territory. And it's only recently that I've understood how deep an effect that had. I remember several years ago, people were talking about ideological bubbles. And I'm not going to deny that those exist, right? Because some people do, at least on the internet, they cluster themselves and then they only hear people who agree with them and whatever. I think this is broadly a thing that happens. But I struggle to believe that this happens very much in real life if you're a Red Tribe member. I don't know, Blue Tribe may disagree with this, but Red Tribe would contend that it's extremely difficult, and I'd say this matches my experience, it's extremely difficult to find media of any kind that isn't, if not pretty explicitly Blue Tribe media, it's very much steeped in Blue Tribe culture and values. I guess the thesis of this video is that, like, this is pretty much invisible if you're not on the outside. A recurring interaction that I have with people who I know to be kind, interacting in good faith, intelligent, people whose good qualities I wouldn't question. I've repeatedly found myself in interactions with them where I'll mention something that, in my view, is just observable fact and something that I haven't been able to escape from for the last 15 years, if not for my entire life. And these people who I know to be smart, acting in good faith, kind, thoughtful, reasonable people will just be like, that's not a thing. And I always feel gaslit. It makes me so angry because it's like, how can you sit there and tell me that this thing that I've observed, frankly, probably as long as I've been conscious of the existence of politics, but certainly over the last several years, like, how can you just say that it doesn't exist? But I've recently come to the conclusion that it's just that it's literally invisible to them because it's the water they swim in. My parents absolutely hate any food that's white and creamy. And so I grew up not eating mayonnaise, not eating sour cream. And whenever it gets just put on a dish that I'm supposed to eat, I'm always kind of startled because it's like, wow, you're putting this? Why are you doing that? Meanwhile, most people, it wouldn't occur to them to be something to notice. And in fact, if I point out, like, hey, doesn't this seem weird to you that they're putting these things on, on these food items or whatever? They're going to be like, no, like, that's normal. Why do you think that that's weird? I think this is essentially the thing that's happening with Red Tribe and Blue Tribe. Because Blue Tribe currently still has cultural dominance, although it seems to potentially be on the wane, they just don't see it at all. They don't see when their values appear in media because, like, that's just values, right? So I introduced this video saying that I finally understood the red pill. Thinking of this in terms of the Matrix, you have the simulated world, which to everybody in it feels real and feels ordinary. And then you have the real world, which you can only access by taking the red pill. And once you've taken the red pill, you kind of can't go back. You know that the simulated world is a simulation. You can't unsee it. Try just for a moment to strip away the valence of, like, believing in reality is superior to living in the simulation. And think about the fish that doesn't realize it swims in water. When you're fully immersed in Blue Tribe culture and values, they are functionally invisible to you. And if you are able to flip your perspective, you'll be able to identify them in a way that you just can't when you're in them, because to you, they're just normal. Maybe I'm using it idiosyncratically, but I didn't really understand in some kind of visceral, fundamental way what people meant by the red pill until this clicked for me today. But I think the more important aspect of this whole thing is the sort of, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The reason this feels like an important aspect to me, which I haven't heard people discuss, is because I've always been at least a little bit to the right of center. I've always been, in terms of, like, values, I've been Red Tribe, but because culturally I was Blue Tribe and immersed completely in Blue Tribe everything, even though I felt like I was a part and like I was seeing things the way that they were, I was really blind to the extent to which Blue Tribe values permeate everything. In some sense, I want to untake the red pill because it really was nicer before. And I feel like I've got a lot to grapple with now, but yeah, there are two things now that I kind of can't unsee. It used to be the case that I just kind of accepted, yes, there are people who are very different from me. It's almost impossible to find English language media that doesn't in some way throw a little jab at my tribe, I guess. But I just sort of accepted it as like, this is just, this is just how it is. And more recently, I've decided that like this isn't how it has to be, and I don't have to put up with it. Like, it feels like there's something kind of unhealthy about hearing people offhandedly kind of try to dehumanize people like you, and just to sit back and be like, well, that's fine. And so what I've tried to do recently is when I catch one of those jabs, when I notice like you specifically are not supposed to be my audience, when I notice that, I turn it off and I move on to something else. And it's actually kind of painful. It's nicer not to notice and not to take it personally. And it does really limit what you can watch. I kind of genuinely don't know whether it's more unhealthy to just sort of take the punches and just be like, yeah, just keep smacking me and I'm just going to try to ignore it. Or to notice them and to tend to reject it, because you start to feel like you start to see enemies everywhere. And that's not a good feeling and not sanity promoting. It feels kind of schizo, except for the problem where like sometimes they really are out to get you. The other thing in this vein, which I have started to notice and can't really ignore anymore, the current manifestation of the Blue Tribe is completely permeated by Marxist ideology, which is a thing you hear right-wingers tossed around a lot, and a good sign that you're listening to an ideological nut job is when they're going Marxism this, Marxism that. Filthy bastard Tommies! Except for the small detail that, on reflection, I think they're completely correct. I have what might be an unusual experience in that I went to an extremely progressive university. Babe in the woods that I was, I took a major, which turned out to be Marxist studies. I did a film studies major at Berkeley, which, is I wasn't aware of any of this stuff at the time, right? But it was like every single theorist that we read, anybody who had an opinion about anything who we read pretty much was some type of postmodernist, typically explicitly Marxist. There was a whole field of film studies called like Marxist theory or something, which like obviously as a somewhat conservative libertarian, I thought all of this stuff was nonsense, but I was, I guess, kind of blindsided. I think I wasn't really processing what was going on. It was sort of pounded into my head that people who complain about the communists are like living in the past, they're like McCarthyists and all of this sort of thing, and they're just imagining enemies where there are none. So I just like really wasn't prepared. And I think it took several years even for me to really kind of metabolize what had happened in that major. Like at some point, again, being incredibly naive, and because this was before Marxists were sufficiently emboldened, we were assigned a film theory essay. It sort of felt like this is the culmination of your work at this school. And you could do it on any topic using any theorists you wanted. And I had kind of registered like, yeah, we're reading a lot of these postmodern guys, these Marxists. All of this seems kind of like gibberish to me, and I don't really buy it. I wonder if there's any like conservative theorists or like anybody who's just not a Marxist theorist. And so I went and naively asked my graduate student instructor for the class about this in office hours. And the hunted look in his eyes, I think, will stay with me forever. He was like almost like a deer in the headlights, because I think you just weren't supposed to ask about this. But he was clearly like embarrassed and not sure how to answer me. And he sort of sheepishly said something along the lines of like, well, we don't really do that anymore. And then suggested one writer who actually wrote our history textbook. I don't know. So when people tell me that like the whole Marxism thing is fake and it's an exaggeration, and like the reasonable people who will even admit that the left has gone too far and woke is bad and all this sort of thing, but they're like, yeah, but it's not like Marxism and it's not all influenced by Marxism. It's like, well, this is explicitly what's being taught. Well, 20 years ago, what was being taught in the humanities in some of our nation's best schools. I don't remember anybody being especially political when I was in high school back in like 2003 to 2007. The closest thing to political we got was we did a mock election, and I remember distinctly being one of two people in my class of like 115 people who voted, or at least admitted to having voted, in this mock election for George Bush, but people didn't really talk about politics. And then within, what, months, a year of going to university, I started to have these really strange interactions with my friends from school who previously had not been particularly political, where they would tell me things like racism equals power plus privilege, so it's impossible for anybody ever to be racist against a white person. And, oh, well, Forbes is a right-wing outlet, so you can't take anything they say seriously. Yeah, so maybe it's like psychologically or something very bad for me that I have taken the red pill, that I'm starting to see these things that I can't unsee. I'm not like super happy about it, but I'm coming to realize that like I think it's really important for people to notice that we are swimming in blue waters. Whether you're pleased with this or not, whether you agree with this or not. Part of the problem, I think, with Blue Tribe being just in the water and the Overton window having shifted to exclude a lot of really normal ideas is that you just don't really hear from normal people with like normal ideas. I'm struck by the similarity to dating discourse, the political discourse and dating discourse, where it's like crazy people from both sides are really loud, and the people whose takes are actually like potentially valuable are nowhere to be seen because like most people don't want to get screamed at by strangers on the internet. We're at an interesting point where like normal ideas still feel too boring to express, but also they incur a lot of risk to express. We're somehow holding at the same time the idea in our heads that there is a consensus. So like surely so many other people agree with these normal ideas that they're not worth saying, but also that there's a consensus telling us that these normal ideas are really controversial and will be punished for saying them, which is like a really bad place to be. So I don't know, I think if it's at all possible for you, even if you think it's boring, especially if you think it's boring, try to express your boring normal ideas to the extent that you can. I do think that introducing politics into apolitical spaces and discussions is like extremely gauche and just a bad idea. But once politics has been broached, people should feel more free to push back. I feel like people have a really difficult time somehow distinguishing between expressing ideas where you're telling other people what they have to believe, as opposed to expressing ideas where you're just telling other people what you think. But telling other people what you personally believe without any suggestion that they have to agree with you, it's only rude if you think it's going to cause like conflict within a discussion where conflict has not already been created. But there's a problem that Red Tribe has to deal with a lot. And it's not like members of Blue Tribe never have to deal with this. I'm sure many people have experienced this. But I guess what I'm saying is that if you're in Red Tribe, unless you've only been in red spaces, you've almost certainly experienced this thing where somebody else will say something like really controversial or something that like really attacks Red Tribe. And like they'll be doing it to signal to their in-group, not realizing that not everybody they're talking to is in their in-group. It just doesn't occur to them that such a person could be in their space, probably because they've been propagandized and believe that everybody who's right of center is evil or stupid or both. Side note, I feel very comfortable in saying that they've been propagandized in this way because even before the culture war really kicked off back in like 2007, when I would mention to people that I was a Republican, the number of times that they responded like, oh, you're a Republican, but you're nice. Or, oh, you're a Republican, but you're smart. These were the default responses. So people will like make these controversial or these hostile statements, not realizing that what they're doing is like extraordinarily rude and is creating the conflict. But because they don't realize it, and because frankly most of the other people with them don't realize it, if you dare to push back in any way, then it appears to everybody that you're the one who created the conflict. And I don't know, maybe etiquette dictates not just taking it like a champ and trying to distance yourself from these people or whatever. I don't think so, though. I think we should all be reading Miss Manners, and my suspicion is that Miss Manners would say something like, you want to politely register that this is just not an appropriate thing to say without condemning the person. For example, like, oh, what an odd thing to say. Maybe the more appropriate thing to say, honestly, is like, oh, I think that's a bit rude, or something like this. Or as my favorite intranet robot friend says, it's very easy to be cowed, even without realizing it, by the sense that you're in the minority, that your friends will be upset, or the people you respect will stop respecting you if you say or think the wrong thing. But I don't know, I think filters are good. I think we should be trying to filter for people who will give us a little bit of grace and try to work things out with us, as opposed to just being like, You did a wrong thing. We can't interact anymore. I just think it's really important that we get more people expressing just sane, normal ideas as if they're sane and normal rather than being afraid to say them at all or treating them as like edgy things that you troll people with. I don't really know where I'm going with this channel. Like, I don't really intend to have to keep up with politics or anything. I don't know. I guess if there are topics you think would be fun for me to talk about, let me know. I'm trying to find more Red Tribe creators and content. So if you have recommendations in that vein, I would really appreciate it. We're all going to make it. It's going to be fine. I'm choosing to believe this, and I think it would benefit us all to believe this. Bye.